Hello everyone, this is going to be a quick video showing how to assemble your lower ODM gear. I have these 4 parts laid out, and this is what we're going to use to assemble the main propulsor area. So, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to snap fit this part here. I'm going to line it up with this line that I have, where we're going to place this square block here. This just slides into place. We have a rail that runs along the bottom here, and I'm just going to slide it into place like so. I have a pretty good snap fit for these parts, but depending on your tolerances, it might be a bit loose. So what I'm going to advise is that you just add a little bit of hot glue or super glue, up to you, just so that you make sure that these parts don't move around while you're at a con. So I'm going to do that right now. Just going to use some basic super glue. I'm using Bob Industries Instacure. What I'm going to do is add a bit onto this face, which makes contact with this propulsor assembly. Right, that should be set in just a minute here. And I'll also add some along the rim of this main body. Make sure it's straight, so I probably won't be able to move it afterwards. Press it into place, and that looks pretty good to me. I'll add some accelerator just to keep it in place for now, or you could just wait, 5 minutes or so for it to fully cure. So moving along, now we're going to attach the top piece to the main body. To do so, you're going to notice that there's some nubs here on the side, and we're going to line these up with the channel that is in the front and the back. Just going to press it into place and then rotate it, and now it's locked in place. It should be a pretty good connection, but you can always add a bit of super glue just to secure it. Alright, perfect. So now this is done, and we're going to move on to assembling the reels. Alright, so now we'll get started putting together the reels. First thing you got to do is add your bungee cord to this middle reel piece. In order to secure the bungee cord, what I do is I just tie a knot to the end of the bungee cord, the part that's going to stay on the inside, and when you pull it, you can see that this stays nicely in place. You can probably then trim off the excess if you don't want to see that, but it's going to be on the inside, so it should be alright. So I'll take my bottom piece, and I want to line it up with the area here that doesn't have holes for the pins. Alright, now that I have these two parts lined up, I'm going to set it off to the side, and if you need to add any glue, I'd suggest you do it now. And now we'll add the pins to the top of the reel. Just have to slide them into place. Should be pretty straightforward. And now that I have all the pins in place, I'm going to attach the top of the reel to the bottom assembly. I'll line up all the holes for the pins, and by doing so, you'll notice that we have this hook for the side brace lining up with the string. Push everything in place. Alright, this is looking good. Okay, so with the reels now assembled, we're going to attach them to the main body of the propulsor. I'll sort out which reel goes on each side by placing them on the table like so. And then I'll take a look at this extruded area down here. I want this to be facing forward, so I'll attach this one first, just to demonstrate. I'll place my main body down here, and then I'll just line up the tabs like that. And to secure it, I'll flip it around to add the zip ties. So at the bottom here, you can see that there's 2 holes for the zip tie to loop through. And then there's an area for this platform. This platform makes it more comfortable when the ODM gear is sitting on your lower back. Now I'm going to pass a zip tie through either of these holes, and you're just going to keep pushing it through until the zip tie comes around the other side. So you can see here that the zip tie looped around, and now I'm just going to secure it. Alright, and now you repeat the same step for the other side and attach the other reel. With both reels now attached with zip ties at the bottom, I'm now going to add the flexible bracket that goes on the reel. So I'll take my flexible bracket and I'm going to line it up with the holes on both the reel and the flexible bracket. I'm just going to push it into place here. I'm going to change the camera angle. Now I'm going to pass a pin through the flexible bracket and the reel. I'm placing the flexible bracket on the first channel here because I'm going to pass my string in through this second channel. Okay, now that I've pushed the pin in, we have the flexible bracket, and it's hinged on by this pin. Now finally, I'll take my string out, just put it away so it's easier to see, and I'll pass my string underneath the pin, and then I'll snake it around my flexible bracket. With the string now snaked around my flexible bracket, and my grapple shooter in place, I'm now going to attach both of these together with a zip tie. So I'll just line up the grapple shooter and the flexible brace in place, and I'm going to pass a zip tie through the top of the silver piece here. Zip tie goes in through the top, thread it through this hole here, secure it in place, and this part is now secure. Now we'll assemble 2 of these swiveling arm pieces, and here's what you'll need. You'll simply just pass the rod through the hole here, and you have this part that can be adjusted depending on how you want this to sit on your lower back. It's a tight tolerance, and plastic grinding on plastic sounds really bad, so what I did was just add a drop or 2 of just all-purpose oil. I added it here, and that does a good job at making this a lot quieter and better performing. So finally, to secure this in place, I'm going to pass a zip tie in this cutout down here. I'll wrap it around and line it up with this recess in the rod, and I'll secure the zip tie till it's tight, and that'll keep it from falling back down. With both of these assembled, I'll add them to the main body now, and to find out which side goes where, you can just take a look at the cutouts. You want them to be laid out like this, with the nylon webbing cutouts farther apart from each other, as opposed to doing this. You'll see why you want it to be like this in a bit. But for now, I'll pass this through the hole. I'll push it in through the bottom, like that. And to keep it from falling out, I'll add these kind of washer slash anchor pieces. And just push it into place. And then I'll do the same for the other side. Okay, with those two swiveling arms now connected, we have the lower ODM gear all set up. Here's what it should look like. We have the reels attached now. We have the side grapple shooters attached to the flexible brace with the string coming out the top, along with these arms that can move around and adjust according to how you want it to fit. Now, one of the new features in my updated ODM gear files is this triangle splitter for the harness. What we're going to use to make this is a 1-inch welded triangle ring, and essentially what we're going to do with this is zip tie it to the inside of this splitter. This will allow us to run the nylon webbing through the back, and then on the outside face you won't have the clutter of nylon webbing, and we'll have this clean face which resembles closely to what they have in the anime. If you don't want to use this welded triangle, I do have a 3D printed version. It's not as strong, but it should do the job. So, you know, my suggestion would be, of course, to use this one, but, you know, you can give this a shot before you purchase the steel ring, since I know they could be a little bit pricey. Alright, so let's assemble this. I'm going to get my zip ties. This is how we're going to put it together. I'm just going to pass the zip ties through here. When you print this, make sure that there's no support inside of these pass-through holes. Okay, so now that I have all my zip ties in here, I'm just going to secure them to each of the triangle corners one by one. Okay, here's what we have so far. I'm just going to tighten everything up now. Alright, there it is. It doesn't have to be super tight. These zip ties only need to kind of hold this in the center, so make sure you don't pull one side more than the others. And I just try to have the ends of the zip ties here pointing outwards, just so it's not bothering me while I'm wearing this. So let's cut off the excess. Some side cutters. Okay, perfect. Now we have this assembled. And later on, when we put this together, we're going to pass the nylon webbing through here, like so. And it's essentially how we'll create the harness. So, last step is to just flip this over and glue this triangle onto the main body here. It's just for aesthetics, but it looks nice nonetheless. So I'll do that with some super glue. Okay, so we have this assembled now. And we will use this later for building the harness. Another thing that got reworked for my updated files are the blade boxes. So I'll start with the top of the blade boxes here. you'll see that now we have a pass-through for the nylon webbing. We're going to use this later on to elevate our blade boxes and keep it attached to the harness. Yours will probably be the same color of your print. Mine is a different piece because I added it after the fact. So this was a bit of a prototype. But other than that, we also have a recessed area here for this peg. It's a separate piece in case that this gets broken or damaged. You may replace it. So let's attach it now, and we're going to be using zip ties again. Okay, so this should be pretty straightforward, but we're essentially just going to loop the zip tie through these holes here. You want to make sure though that the head of the zip tie is on top and not on the inside, since we don't want it to interfere with any of the moving parts inside. So I'll secure it like this, and then I'm going to leave it on the outermost area here, just so that it doesn't also interfere with this. Okay, so let's secure the rest of the zip ties, and then we can check for any interferences again. Okay, so I've secured all the zip ties now. You can see they're all facing outwards, and the head of the zip ties are up here, like mentioned previously. And now I'll just cut off the excess here. Okay, and now I just want to check for any interference with this. Seems to be okay. Obviously it's going to bump into there just a tad bit, but otherwise it can still move around. Now let's place in these swiveling arms or anchor points for the blades. So the leftmost side over here, you can see that the zip ties are over here. We're going to use the one with the shorter stem. So you can see we have this anchor point here. The stem is pretty short there. This is one of the middle ones. So hopefully you can see the difference there. Let's focus. Yeah, there we go. It'll also be labeled in the STL files, but so this one you'll just slide into the leftmost side, like so, and then you'll do the rest of these two that are kind of the same size of the stem. Just slide them in over here. Okay, so now what we want to do is line all of these up so that we can push the rod in through all of them. So this might be a bit difficult to capture on camera since I have to twist and get the right angle, but you can see here on the first one, if we move it around, spin it, we get the hole lined up for the rod. And you essentially just want to do the same thing for each of them until you get them all lined up. So I have all three of them pushed in now. Show you the back here. And just move them around. Make sure that you can bring them all the way back like so. And then push them all the way forward. You will place the blades in here eventually. So I want to make sure that these can move around freely, so that you can anchor the blades in correctly. So now let's move on to the rest of the blade box. I'll show you how to assemble the rest. With all three pieces, you just want to slide them into each other. I'm going to line up all the nylon webbing pass-throughs, and this would be the inside of the blade box. So just going to get them all in the same orientation, and you can just slide them onto each other like this. There we go. Now let's secure this. So to do that, I have created some pins that will go through these holes here and also secure the brackets at the same time. So let me demonstrate that. Okay, so I'm done cleaning up my pins. These are ready now. And let's start assembling the brackets. So I'm going to use the bottom bracket here, since this is the easiest one to assemble. and this one goes down here at the bottom of the blade box. The outside face of the blade box is this one, with these small squares here. And then the outside of the bracket is this one with the longer sides of the bracket facing outwards. So we just push it in. And then before we push in the pins, let's also assemble these top and middle brackets. So for this piece, I want to push the whole unit in at once so that it can line up with the pins correctly. Some quick tips for printing this out. I generally never add any supports on the threads here just because it's quite difficult to remove them. I don't add any supports on the inside here since it's a dome and it generally prints fine without any supports on the inside. And for example, for this piece, I just added just a tiny bit of support here so that this area is not printing on in thin air. Okay, so let's assemble this. I can grab my top bracket and the middle bracket and just slide in these pieces together. This is the smooth area and it doesn't have any threads on the inside, so that's how I know that slides in. Then I'll take my top piece of the fuel tank and then just screw this in. And then finally I'll do the same for the bottom. Okay, and here it is. The brackets are now assembled and it's connected to the fuel tank. Just one thing to note, if you're assembling the other blade box, so the left side, or the left blade box, you're going to want to screw in this top and bottom in reverse, since it's a mirror and the threads will also be mirrored. To put this together, we essentially just want to take our bracket assembly that we just built here, and we're going to lower it into the holes for the brackets, like this. Just wiggle it into place. You might need a bit of a push to kind of set it into place. You could use a mallet, but not a whole lot of force is necessary. If you're having issues pushing it in, make sure that there's no supports on the inside interfering. You could also sand it down just a tad bit so it slides easier. On the inside of the blade boxes, you'll see that we have 5 holes here for our pins. So essentially you just want to put your pin in there and push it in place. You'll definitely need a mallet of some sorts or a hammer. This is just a dollar store mallet that I've had for years. You know, nothing fancy. So just kind of tap it into place. So you'll see that it's just about flush. You don't want to push it any more than this because you could damage the outside if you push it to the outside face. So just be careful with that. I'm not really hammering this in too hard, so just kind of light taps until it's just about flush like that. I'll just keep on pushing these pins in, secure everything. If you're having difficulty pushing in the pins, it might be that this hasn't set all the way to the bottom. So you could, flash some light in here, make sure that there's no interferences. And if you are still having trouble, you could just tap this with the mallet in place. Make sure that it's pushed all the way down. Okay, these will be peeking out just a little bit more than the bracket pins, since there's like a height difference here. So just take note of that, and again, make sure you don't push this in too much or too hard, or you'll start seeing them peek out through the outside face here. Okay, and there we have it. Blade boxes are fully assembled. We'll just get some different angles so you can see it. Okay, with the blade box assembled, just repeat the same steps for the other blade box, and then we can move on to the next thing. Last thing before we start assembling the harness, take a look at the inside of the hexagon splitters. There's some text indicating where it connects to. It won't be super clear since it's 3D printed, but It should help you get orientated in what direction to run the nylon webbing. There's a left and a right side, so just make sure you have them in the correct orientation to take advantage of the text here. To put together the leg harnesses, we're going to need 1-inch nylon webbing. I'm using silver. We're going to need about 8 buckles and double that, so 16 either metal tri-glides or these plastic ones. As an optional upgrade, I sometimes use some of this 1-inch elastic band. I put this around the buckles to make this more flexible and have a bit more give. You could of course make everything out of this elastic band, but I find that it's a bit more expensive than the nylon webbing. And then finally, I'm also going to show you an alternative for sewing. I normally stitch everything together, but you could also use Chicago screws to join 2 pieces of nylon webbing together. Chicago screws are basically just rivets that have a cap that unscrews. So here's an example. The cap has a screw, and you can just put them together. I hole punch both of these and then join them with the Chicago screw, but I'll show you how to do this later on. Before we can start cutting out our pieces of nylon webbing, we need to take some measurements. So I printed out this diagram here just so I have something to point at, but we need to measure the circumference of these points here. So measure the circumference around the thigh on this upper area here. You measure another one here a bit lower, one right above the knee. Once you have those measurements, we also are going to need to measure from this point up here to the top of the knee. We're going to do that twice because we want to form an X. I almost forgot. We need a measurement right below the knee as well, so we can form our other X. So we're going to take this measurement here as well. And this X pattern here in the front, we actually need to cut out twice, because the X is going to be visible in the front and the back. Now I'm going to go ahead and take these measurements and I'll write them down so you can see what I have. Obviously your measurements will be different depending on your height, but at least it should give you a baseline template. Okay, so I have all my measurements now. I wrote them down in pen. Remember that the purple lines here are our circumference that goes around the leg, and then the blue ones are the ones that are going to run across the front or the back of your leg. So the circumference for the top of my thigh here is going to be 23, and we have 22 at this point here, 15 right above the knee, and then 12 under the knee. And then for this top X pattern, it's going to be 12 inches running across diagonally, and then 13 for the shin area down here. So now that I have these measurements, I need to add 4 inches to the circumference measurements. The reason why is we need to add buckles, and we also need to add some tri-glides to secure those buckles. So we need a little bit of extra room to do that. So I need to add 4 inches to all of these, and I'm going to write that down in purple marker. 23 plus 4 is 27. I'll write that down here in bigger font so you can see it. Right under that, it's going to be 26 for this point, and then 19 over here, and then finally 16. So these are the lengths that I need to cut my nylon webbing. And then for these blue measurements, I don't need to add extra slack to them. I don't need to add that extra 4 inches because I don't need to add buckles to these points. My camera died while I was talking, but I added some labels here just so you guys can follow along easier and not be confused when I cut out my nylon webbing. The top point here is going to be thigh 1, so I'm just labeling it as T1, then T2 for the next point, The next two here are just going to be knee 1 and then knee 2. And then finally for these diagonal points, since they're interchangeable, both of these will be referred to as diagonal 1 for D1 and then D2. So I'm going to cut out my nylon webbing now, and I'm going to label my pieces exactly like this so that it's easier to reference them. I have all my nylon webbing straps cut out, and I'm going to temporarily secure all of them with these clips. But before I can do that, we have to put together the knee piece now so that we can determine the distance between the top of the knee piece, or the top of the knee strap, and the bottom of the knee strap. So to put together the knee armor part, all you have to do is pass a piece of elastic bungee cord through the hole on the side. You tie a knot on both ends, and then you can secure it. So I have my knot over here on the inside. I'm just going to pull this to secure it tightly, and then I'll tie a knot on this side. Knot secured, you can see that we have some flexibility here, and both of the knee pieces are securely tied together. You can just trim off the excess. And now I'm going to put together these pieces with the clips, and it's going to give me the distance between both of the knee parts. Now that I have this clip together, I'm going to slide the ends of this nylon strap into the back of this knee piece. Well, let me flip this over. You can see I'm just going to pass it through the loops here. Before you sew everything together, you need to make sure that the ends of this X pattern fit inside of the leg piece. So your leg armor might be different depending on how you scaled it, but generally if you open this X too much, then it might not fit within this section. So make sure you test fit this first before you sew everything together. So now that I know that the bottom of my X pattern here fits perfectly within the knee loops, I can then adjust these top ends here. I can maybe open up the X a bit if it's too narrow, or I can close it up. It mostly comes down to aesthetics. You can try test fitting this on your leg to see how you like it. This thigh strap too can also be moved up or down. So this is entirely up to you. I think I'm going to close up the gap a bit more. Okay, I think I like how this looks. I'm going to test fit this. Just wanted to make note of one thing. I put these thigh straps over the diagonal ones. That's just mostly preference. You can do it the other way if you want to. I just think this looks neater once I have everything sewed up. So these T1 and T2 parts go over the diagonal ones. Okay, so I'm going to start with the top right corner here on the thigh strap. And I'm going to use my tailor's chalk to show you how I'm going to sew this together. So essentially I want to start at the right top left here, and go down, come over here to the bottom left corner, go up diagonally like this, and then finally finish over here at the top left again. I'm using a straight stitch here on my sewing machine. I'm going to do my best to stitch this together without getting in the way of the camera. might be a bit difficult to see because of the tailor's chalk. And you obviously don't need to make these markings, but I thought it would be useful to see what path I'm taking before I stitch it. So now I'm going to repeat the same process for these 3 clips here. So now I'm going to talk about the alternative for sewing using the Chicago screws. Along with the Chicago screws, you'll also need a hole punch. I'm using this 5mm leather hole punch. I'll leave a link in the description. And what I'm going to do is hole punch both of these scrap pieces of nylon webbing together and then join them with the Chicago screws. I'm going to switch camera angles just so I don't hammer on this surface. Okay, so I'm going to lay down this scrap cutting mat here so I don't damage my surface. And I'm going to punch holes on both of these nylon webbing pieces. So I'm going to grab a mallet and set up the hole at about here because I want them to intersect like that. Okay, you can see it makes a pretty clean hole. The other one I want to kind of come at this angle. So think about here. Should be good. If I have too much, either way I could just trim the excess. Perfect. So I have my shortest post I could find here for my Chicago screw. So I'm just going to put these together now. Okay, there we go. It's not 100% flush, the post for the Chicago screw. It's just a tad bit big, but it does a pretty good job, you know, as opposed to sewing. If you don't have a sewing machine, this is a good alternative. So if you're going to use this, anytime I stitch anything together, you would just use Chicago screws. It's definitely a different look, but if you prefer the aesthetics of this, then by all means. Either way, I think it might actually be quicker than sewing all the stitches. Here's what I have so far. I've stitched all of these 4 corners here. And I just finished this one up here. Make sure you don't forget this spot, because otherwise it's not going to keep its structure. And then last 2 I have to do are these down here. I finished adding the stitches on the bottom 2 here. And here's what I have. So everything's stitched up. Here it is compared to the diagram that we have. So hopefully the diagram helped out. And I added the labels back here just so you would know what pieces they are. So now I am going to add the buckles to these ends and to the top 2 over here. We're going to test fit it and then we'll wrap up with the bottom piece. To add the buckles to each end, you'll need either a metal tri-glide or a plastic tri-glide, and then you'll need a buckle. I'll add a plastic and a metal one to each of these just so you can see the difference and see which one you prefer. So I'll start with this. Just pass the tri-glide through like that. And then in order to secure the buckle, we need to loop around the buckle and then pass it into that same tri-glide. And then just slide your tri-glide up here. This keeps it secure from slipping back out. Now I'll demonstrate with the plastic tri-glide. Same thing. We go through the tri-glide. And then we loop around our buckle. And finally secure it through that same tri-glide. And again, I just slide it all the way down. I try and leave just a little bit of slack here in case it's too tight around my leg. I can loosen this and then just give myself a little bit more space. So now I'll go to the other end. Same thing over here, but I'm using the other side of the buckle. So we're putting in the tri-glide first. Buckle second. And then secure it with the tri-glide. So here's how it looks. And here's the difference between the metal tri-glides and then the plastic ones. Before I add the buckles on these two ends, I need to pass it through the knee piece. Once I have it in here, I can add the buckles now. Same steps as the other two above. So we have all three of these ends with buckles. Now that we're done with the top part, it's a good time to test fit it and see if you like how it feels. If you think it's too tight, you can try adding some of this 1-inch elastic band. I would sew this onto here and then create a bit of an extension. That way you can have a bit more slack, and this adds a lot of flexibility, so it would be a lot more comfortable. Another optional upgrade is, instead of using tri-glides to secure the buckles, you could add a stitch line here, removing this tri-glide, and that would look a lot neater. So if you prefer that look, you could add your stitches now. Keep in mind that the buckles aren't the only way to secure these leg straps. If you feel like you have another fastener that you want to use, like Velcro, that should be totally fine. I just find that the buckles are easy to take off and they hold really well. But by no means is this the only way of making your leg harnesses. I unclipped everything and I added my stitches on these 3 points here. So now what I want to do is take my other two D2 straps and I want to copy the angles I use for the X. I'm going to clip this together. This is what I'm going to use for the back of the leg pieces. Since this is the front of our pattern, I'm going to flip this over. And I'm going to kind of just lay this here in the back. What I'm trying to accomplish right now is, before I put this together, again into the knee piece, I want to stitch this point here, and I want to join together these parts here. So what I'll do is I'm going to clip together these 2 points as well. And I'll clip together this. You can see how I try and form a bit of a triangle here in the corner. So now I'm just going to test fit it, see if it's to my liking. This is the front. I already added the stitches here. And then here's the bottom part. This is going to rest around my ankle. here in the back we have the clips for this back X, and then obviously it's the same bottom. If I do like how this fits, then I'm going to stitch it together, and then we can add this to the knee armor piece. Alright, I added my stitches. Here's what it looks like. Now to trim the excess, all I'm going to do is just cut off the pieces coming from the back nylon webbing that are peeking out, like that. There we go. Do the same thing over here. Again, just cutting off the pieces from the back nylon webbing that are peeking out. Now what I'll do to preserve this edge is I'm going to use a small butane torch to heat treat it. You can use a lighter, but be very careful since you're using fire. You don't want to catch this on fire, and I don't think the fumes are very good, so make sure you have ample ventilation. Okay, there we go. So at this point I still have my clips up here, just so that this could keep its shape. But I'm going to take them off now, and I'm going to add this to the knee piece. So I'm just going to slide in this top part, same thing we did last time. Here we are. Now before I add my stitches, I'm going to add my buckles just so that I have a better idea of where I can add the stitches and it doesn't interfere with the buckles. Okay, here we go. So I added the buckle, and now the last thing I need to do is just mark where I want to add these stitches. So this is coming from the back area here. You can see that these are the bottom parts. Now I just want to add my stitches here, but I'm going to add this under. I'm going to clip this in place for now, and then I'll put the other one over here. Since I need more space to add my stitches, I'm going to just make a mark here, and then I'm going to undo my tri-glide and the buckle, and that way I can have more space to move around and add the stitches. I added my stitches in here, and now this is fully secured. We have the back, buckle back here, and then this is the front. Let me zoom out so I can show you the whole piece. Now to assemble the top of the harness. I'm going to refer to the diagram I used earlier, but now I added a few things. So here is the triangle splitter, the one that we built earlier. This is the hexagon splitter, and this is just going to be the belt. So I'm going to draw out some lines to represent the nylon webbing straps that we need to cut out. So to start off, we need a long strap that will go around our back and come over to the top of this triangle splitter. And it's going to start from the hexagon. So it's going to go around the back like this, and then it's going to come over on the front and connect there. We're going to do the same thing for this one, like that. And then we need a strap that will connect between these 2 points. Going to use a purple marker now just to add a bit of contrast. We need a strap that will go from the triangle splitter to the hexagon, like this. and then from the hexagon we'll connect to our belt. So that's how we're going to set up our harness. By the way, we're going to need 2 of these because we need a strap that goes on the front and on the back. So we're going to need 2 of these as well. I'm gonna go get the measurements for these straps and then I'll write them out here so you have a baseline again. And then we'll go from there. I got the measurements I needed. So this long strap running around the back is going to be 34 inches on both sides. It's going to run all the way around the back into the hexagon. The one for the chest here is 9 inches. The one that connects from the triangle to the hexagon is going to be 12 inches. And then finally, the one that goes from the hexagon to the belt is going to be 14 inches. I'm not going to add labels to these because I already have labels here on the hexagon piece. So in order for things not to get too confusing, I'm just going to be referring to these labels here. But the first thing I'll do for now is I'm going to cut out the long piece that goes around the back. I added one of my long straps to the back plate, and with this other strap I'll demonstrate how I did it. You just follow the path here and push the nylon webbing in. And then I'm going to try and leave less material at the bottom and a lot more at the top, since this one has to go around your shoulders. You can also use a smaller version of this back plate. It has less tabs and it's easier to print, but they both do exactly the same thing. The only difference is that this bigger back plate supports the top ODM gear better. So if you eventually decide on adding the top ODM gear, this one would support the weight easier. I'm going to add the shoulder trim to the nylon webbing. You just pass it through like this, and you go over and around these tabs to secure it. Now I'm going to add a tri-glide to the end of this. That way we can secure the triangle splitter in just a second. Okay. Now we'll take the triangle splitter that we made earlier, and on the inside we have the triangle ring. And I'll just pick a side and pass the nylon webbing through. So now we have this, and I can secure it with the tri-glide. And then I just tuck this piece under the shoulder trim. There we go. So far we've been working on this 34-inch strap that goes along the back. But now I want to add this 9-inch strap that goes along my chest. You could just make this one piece, but then I find that the harness is difficult to put on and take off. So what I do is I add a buckle here right in the middle, and I split my 9-inch strap into 2 pieces. So let me show you. Here's one side of the chest nylon webbing. I made sure I left just a bit of extra space for the tri-glide and the buckle, since this takes up some room when you fold it over. And I'm going to show you how I do the other side. So I'll just take a piece of nylon webbing, going to add a tri-glide to it. Then I'm going to go around the inside of the triangle so that both of these can be pointing to each other. I'm going to secure this end with the tri-glide. And then I'm going to take the opposite side of the buckle and go around. And then I'm going to secure this end with the same tri-glide. This buckle that's going to rest right in the middle of your chest makes it really easy to take off and put the harness back on. I'm going to flip this around. And I'm going to add both of my hexagon splitters. I'll take the left and right side, and I'm going to look for the entrance that says backplate. And I'm going to add them to this nylon webbing strap with a tri-glide. It says backplate on the inside here, and I also want to make sure that this side is facing outwards. I'll do the same for the other one. I want to now add this piece that runs along the side here, which is 12 inches for me. So we're going to connect it here. And this is going to connect our hexagon to our triangle. Okay, I attached the webbing on this side, and now on the hexagon, I'm going to add it in this slot that says front harness. Now is a great time to test fit this. Make sure that it fits snugly. Otherwise, the weight won't be distributed properly, and when we add the blade boxes to the harness, it's going to pull too much to one side. So far, we've completed all 5 of these measurements up here, and I put a line through them so you can see we're done with it. And now all we need to do is cut 4 of these 14-inch nylon webbing straps, and we're going to run it from the hexagon splitter to the belt. I have the straps cut out now, but I want to talk about this piece first, since we're going to add them to the straps that we just cut. We are going to eventually add this to our belt, like this. And I'm going to use these parts to retain the angle on the nylon webbing. I want them to be angled like this at all times, and without these parts that have this angled cutout, they don't stay in place, so that's the reason we're adding them to our belt. I'm going to use my front belt slot. That's this one right here. Just going to pass my nylon webbing through, same as always. Secure it with the tri-glide. Now on the opposite end, you're going to go around this cutout here and secure it to the tri-glide. I'm using this piece since I know I want the nylon webbing to come in at this angle. And then I'll just use the opposite one for this side. Now we can utilize our back belt slot, which is this one here. And we're going to secure the lower ODM gear at the same time using that same nylon webbing strap. I had to add a couple of extra inches since we have to go through this square block as well. First, I'm going to add a single tri-glide to my nylon webbing strap. I'm going to put it just about in the middle. And now I'm going to put this top end through the bottom of this square block like this. You can see this is what the inside looks like. Just going to feed it through. Pass it over on the top end. And then our tri-glide will be down here. Now I need to add a second tri-glide at the top. So we want a tri-glide at the top, and then we want one at the bottom as well. And now let's secure this to the hexagon. So again, I'm using my back belt slot. And there we have this side. Now for this bottom tri-glide, I'm going to add this part before I secure it. And now for this bottom tri-glide, I'm going to add this piece before I secure it. Have quite a bit of extra, but you can trim this off once we're done. Repeat the same thing for the other side. Just one last look. We have the hexagon up here. We have a tri-glide over the square block. We have a tri-glide at the bottom of the square block. And then on this end, we have this belt piece. Quick side tangent, if you're making the Mikasa ODM gear variant and you want to add the chest piece, you need to use this front chest slot, and you would run a piece of nylon webbing from here to the inside of the chest. And then to mount it, you would put a piece of nylon webbing around the top here, and then pass it through your buckled chest piece. So it would look something like this. Just make sure you're using the right files, since the Mikasa variant has these top holes moved closer to the center, so that it doesn't interfere with the triangle splitter. I unfortunately don't have it on hand right now. Alright, we're reaching the final steps here. Now let's add this to a belt. So I'm going to start on this side over here, and the first piece I'm going to add is this left front belt. This one here. So in this direction, just going to slide the belt in. I'm going to bring it all the way to the other side. Over to this side, and then I can secure it. Next, I'm going to add my hip grapple shooter. I'm also just going to feed this into the belt, slide it all the way down. It's about here. After that, I'm going to add my blade box belt anchor, which is this one. And I'm going to make sure that this face is pointing outwards. So in this same orientation, and slide this in. Next, I'll add the left back belt, which is the same one holding the ODM gear. Slide this down. Now that I've added that one, that concludes the left side. So let me show you what I have so far. On this side of the belt, I have the left front belt. Then I put my grapple shooter. I have the blade box belt anchor. And then right behind here, I have the left back belt. So now I'm going to add the right side. This one is the right back belt. I want to mirror the other side, so now I'll add my blade box belt anchor. Then I'll slide in the hip grapple shooter. And then finally, I can add the front belt. Alright, that's finished. So I'll just take one last shot of everything. You can still move these around depending on your preference, but generally this is how I have mine set up, so you can copy this if you want to. Now we can finally wrap this up. I'm going to add this harness to the mannequin, and we're going to run our last piece of nylon webbing that goes to our blade box, which is this slot right here. Alright, so I'm going to demonstrate how to attach your blade box. So we want to take this cylindrical peg here and hook it into our blade box belt anchor here. So you just line it up, you push it in, and then you can just let it slide down into the slot. It's better if we have two mounting points for our blade box, just so that we can add some of the weight of the blade box to our harness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a piece of nylon webbing into this, and I'm going to add a buckle to the end. Okay, I added my buckle, secured with a tri-glide, the same way we pretty much secured everything else, so nothing new. And I'm going to put the blade box here again. Now that we have this secured, I can determine the distance between this piece of nylon webbing to the hexagon splitter. So now I want to cut out another nylon webbing strap that will connect these two pieces. Okay, so I cut out my piece. I'm going to add it to the hexagon. I'm going to loop it around the slot, just as always. Secure it with the tri-glide. I'm going to cut off the excess. And here we have now another mounting point for our blade box. Now to make sure that this piece is tight, and that way the blade box can distribute some of the weight both on your belt and the harness. So it'll be pulling down on this and on your belt. And when you need to take this off, you just remove this buckle here, you lift up the blade box, and then you can take it out from this belt blade anchor. I've added the leg harness to the mannequin just so I could show you one last thing. If you find that your leg harness is slipping down after walking around or just using it, I find that it's helpful to run a piece of nylon webbing with a buckle over here on the side to prevent it from falling down. So here's what I mean. If you put one of these on either side, it'll prevent the leg harness from slipping down. I made it in silver just so you could see it, but you can make this in black so it blends in a bit better with the clothes you're wearing. And if you want this to even out, you could also add one on this side over here on the inner kind of back thigh. I added the strap in the back here just so you could see what it looks like. So here's both of them. Okay, that concludes the tutorial. I'm just going to take one last shot of the back here so you can see everything set up. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments and I'll try and address all of them. Otherwise, you can reach out to me on Etsy.